are again, a new season in our award-winning series of Let's Talk podcasts, presented to you by the Hazel and Betty Ford Foundation. I'm your host, William C. Moyers. Welcome and thanks for joining us. Today our topic is Love First, a family's guide to intervention. And my guests are the authors, Deborah Jay and Jeff Jay. In case you're wondering, yes, they are a couple. Deborah and Jeff have been married since 1992. Together they are a shining example of how it works and how impactful their work has been in helping thousands of other people in the nearly quarter century that I've known them. Jeff and Deborah, welcome to our program today.
Thanks for having us, William.
It's so nice to be here with you, William. Thank you for inviting us.
Well, thank you for being here from your home, actually in Grosse Pointe Farm, Michigan. I'm very envious of your location there. Jeff, I want to start with you by reading one of your famous quotes. Quote, "I believe in intervention for a very simple reason. It saved my life." Can you explain?
That's exactly right. My alcoholism and drug addiction had taken me down to the point that I was sleeping under bushes in the city parks out in California, homeless and penniless. And it was a rather untraditional but effective family intervention that got me out of where I was and got me into a hospital and into treatment. And without that intervention, I'm certain that I would not have survived. That was back in 1981, so it's been quite a while now.
Deborah, you were already in recovery in your own right. Can you explain?
I can. You know, I am an adult child of an alcoholic, but in my 20s, trust me, I didn't think that affected me in the least. In fact, I thought I was controlling the whole world. And I went through a really excellent family program for somebody else that I was helping, of course. And halfway through, all of my illusions came crashing down. And I had this understanding that no matter how hard I tried, my life wasn't really working. And I was told about Al-Anon. And I asked for help. I reached out and I was directed to go to Al-Anon. That was over 30 years ago now, which I cannot believe. But truly, it changed my life. In fact, I would say it saved my life. I don't know where I would have been if it hadn't been for that program. I'm still active in to this day.
So both of you had that very intense personal experience with addiction and recovery, and you have turned that into a calling and helping people. Of course, your book, Love First, has been around since 2000, but this is the third edition of Love First. Deborah, what is the difference with this edition?
Well, you know, we did a second edition in '08, William, but we only added information. So here we are 20 years later, which is hard to believe. And we realized it was time that the book needed to be reworked from cover to cover. Because of course, in 20 years, you grow, you learn so much, you learn from families that you've worked with, you've learned from the alcoholics and addicts. And so we really were able to enrich the book. And one of the most exciting things that we've done with the book is that we've kind of done away with the idea of the intervention team, which sounds counterintuitive, but the reason we've done that is because that has a very distinct beginning and ending, and teams would fall apart. So the entire book is informed now that from the very beginning, we develop family recovery teams, and intervention is just the first thing that you do.
Jeff, what's changed when it comes to negotiating with the person who's the focus of the intervention?
So much has changed, really. I mean, of course, our initial contribution was really to make it all about love and not a tough love approach, but a love first approach. And that was true from the beginning. But now we have learned so much from disparate fields of psychology and even, interestingly, from FBI hostage negotiation techniques, which actually have a lot to do with certain kinds of counseling. So that, for example, instead of thinking of, Joey is having the problem and we are going to do something about it, we're thinking about it in terms of we've all got a problem called addiction. And so Joey is not our adversary. Joey is our counterpart. He is our partner in this negotiation. And how are we going to work together as a family and friends group to deal with the problem that we all have? And so that really changes the whole feel of the intervention and allows love to come forward even more powerfully.
Deborah, talk about how you have expanded the footprint here, if you will.
Well, sure. You know, William, you have written a number of books yourself, and you know how it is. You want your books to be really rich. You want to give your readers, and in our case, families of beloved alcoholics and addicts, as much foundation as you can. But you know, you can't have a book that's 500 pages. And so we decided to get really creative with the third edition of Love First. And this is what we've done. At the end of very specific chapters, we offer links to different information that will really help families move forward. So for instance, we have what we call snap trainings for families. And these are short podcasts, 3 to 10 minutes. And they help families with questions like, you know, how do I talk to my loved one's counselor in treatment? Or how do I talk to my loved one in treatment? All sorts of one topic questions with really practical action-based information that families aren't going to really get anywhere else. Additionally, what we've done, which we're really excited about, is the Best Minds podcast. And what we've done is we have interviewed the very best minds in the addiction field all across the country. And these are deep dives. These are hour-long podcasts. These are people, family members, would never get a chance to sit down and talk to. And frankly, a lot of professionals as well. So Best Minds podcast is...
Yeah, it's really exciting. The first one we did was with Dr. Robert DuPont, who I know you know. So he did an hour on opioid addiction. And then we just did John Driscoll from Hazelden Center City, the executive vice president. What a fabulous deep dive we did with him. And then we have other podcasts on traumatic brain injury, sex addiction, specialty areas that some families might be interested in. And if they are, they can go right there. We've got a QR code. They'll go right there and get that hour-long deep dive into specialty topics.
And that's what's really great. There's a QR code also for everything, so they can just scan it on their phone and boom, they're right there. So we're really excited about that.
And those changes in technology, I remember when we first met each other back in the mid-90s, and then of course when Love First was published back in 2000, who could have ever imagined the applications that we would be using to bring what you have to people today. Jeff, how have professionals been impacted by yours and Deborah's thinking over the years, and how will they be impacted in this new book?
Well, it's going to give professionals a lot more specific tools to use. I started to talk about one a moment ago with the negotiation techniques. I think that a lot of times professionals, because they're not trained in intervention through their master's programs or even most counselor training programs, they don't have the specific tools that you need to break through, to use the family and friends group to really work through denial and get to a moment of clarity where a person will say yes to treatment. They are, of course, trained in motivational interviewing, which is more of a one-to-one technique with the addicted person. But if you're really locked in denial and really using, that's not going to go very far. So we want to give the professionals the tools so they can move out of that addicted headspace and get to the person's heart so they can make a better decision and have that moment of clarity and move into a real good residential treatment program like Hazel and Betty Ford.
And I'd like to add one quick thing, like the SNAP trainings for families. There are already admissions departments sending people to lovefirst.net, which is our website. Anyone can use those, because what they essentially do is really cool down the system. And things like, you know, how to talk to your loved one's counselor. You don't get this barrage of all these phone calls and emails. So it creates manageability. And so people are already using this in their treatment settings.
So we're going to have a third edition now of Love First, and it's a powerful resource in its own right. But Deborah, your book, It Takes a Family, is going to be the second edition. And how do those two go together? They're meant to go together, yes?
They are. You know, they're published by Hazelden. And when we initiated the talks with Hazelden about this, we really talked about putting these together as companion books. So they're completely designed now to go together. But the reason is, it brings us back to the first question you asked me, is that if we are going to tell families, you are now a family recovery team, we really need to give them something extraordinarily meaningful and something they will stick with as they move forward into that first year of recovery for their loved one. And that's what It Takes a Family does. So today, Love First, it brings people all the way through the intervention, but then it brings it to the next book in this set. And that book brings them through that first year of recovery so that the whole family is acting now as a really fantastic support system, and they love it. They love it. And so it's really works out well.
The great thing is you can imagine, William, if we can do more than just get, let's say, Maria into treatment and recovery, but also parents and siblings all getting into Al-Anon on their own so that everybody's working their own program and really getting into recovery as a group without getting into each other's business, it becomes so powerful. It's just life-changing.
We have about 5 minutes left, and in the time we have, I find it, you always got to be suspect when you hear that something is free, right? But I know you all are offering free workshops that really sort of are penned to these two books. Talk more about those, if you would, please.
Well, we're going to do that because our books have been used for years. Love First has been the top selling intervention book for 20 years. It Takes a Family. And so what we want to say to people is, listen, we want to take you through this workshop. We're not going to charge you anything for it. And the reason is because we want you to know what's new, what's changed, what's better, all the tools in there that you can use in your own practice, and families can join too, because for a lot of families, they may be very interested in this information. And we don't want to charge anybody anything because that just puts up a wall for people, maybe not to do it. So we just want to say, listen, just join us. Let's do this together because we all are trying to help the still suffering alcoholic and addict and their family.
Jeff, you and I talked off camera a little bit about your own story, and we talked about the fact that you all have had to adjust your business in the midst of this pandemic. We know the pandemic is still with us across the country. Here we are doing this interview this way. Hopefully by the time your book is out in the spring of 21, we'll be on the backside of the pandemic. But to talk just a little bit, Jeff, about somebody who might be watching today and wondering if now is the right time to go and get help if they're struggling with alcohol and other drugs. Is the pandemic an excuse not to get treatment?
No, absolutely not. In fact, I think in many ways it's the perfect time to get treatment. So many things are shut down right now. It's the perfect time to take the time to move away. In fact, I just helped a very top executive take time away from their job and go get the good residential treatment that they need. And families are finding out that even if they are dispersed across the country with different members living in different cities, we can all come together on Zoom. We can do the same kind of in-depth training and rehearsal. And some people will be in the room with the alcoholic during the intervention process, and some of the family members will be in different parts of the country and joining by Zoom and be on the big screen TV in the family room, and everyone will see each other. And the fact is that we've all become so accustomed to visiting with each other on FaceTime and Zoom and WebEx and what have you, that this has become second nature. And I have a theory about it, William, that, for many decades, we've gotten used to having very powerful emotional relationships with people on the little screen or the big screen through movies and television. So really connecting with our loved ones in this way is not as artificial or strange as it may seem. It's actually very natural. And we find that the interventions are just as effective doing it this way as they ever were in person.
And Deborah, the last question to you. You talked about your own experience of being in recovery from a loved one's struggles. What is your final message for us today about families that are struggling right now with a loved one who has a substance use disorder and that person is not willing to get help necessarily? Should the family member go ahead and take care of themselves? How does that work?
Well, yes, there are two things that you can do. There are real action steps, and that's what we're talking about with Love First, that really, really work. High success rates of getting people to come to a place of saying, yes, I will accept help. And it's a very smart, loving process. But the other thing is, of course, we want to take care of ourselves, and getting our own recovery as family members is the last thing we think we need. We're all that way. I really haven't been affected. I live in another state, or I may live with the person, but I have not been affected because we've spent all our time focusing on our beloved alcoholic or addict. And the thing about it is that when the whole family comes together and they get involved in the whole recovery process, it changes everything in ways you can't imagine. My own personal story, I was a hard worker. I did everything right, and my life was falling apart. I couldn't figure it out. And it really was how much I'd been affected and what I couldn't see. So there is tremendous hope. I am married to somebody who was considered a hopeless case. He's now 39 years sober, and he was the worst alcoholic addict you could imagine. And there is hope. There are things we can do. We just need to reach out and get the right information, get the right help, have that willingness, and take it one step at a time, and things start changing.
Debra Jay, Jeff Jay, thanks for being the perfect example of hope and help and healing. Thanks for being with us today. Please join us for another edition of Let's Talk, and make sure to tell your family and friends, colleagues, and fellow travelers to check out our podcast too. These podcasts bring us together and remind us that together we can build a healthier, wholesome, and happier tomorrow, one day, one life, one family at a time. Take good care.